Started my first startup in '97. The world told me I was insane.
Our goal is creating future economies that are more regenerative and sustainable.
Something didn't match up. Why hasn't this become the next big thing? And that's where we invested.
The whole purpose of achieving anything in life is measurement.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Mano from the Shadow team here. We're really excited today. Obviously, with Summit going on, we've had some great conversations, some great panels. And this panel today is how offsite impacts the residential development and construction, led by Brian, CEO of Module. I'll let everyone else introduce themselves. But today's panel discussion is primarily going to be focused on how offsite construction is influencing the residential development industry. Attendees will hear from building product supply companies, real estate developers, and construction tech companies on how offsite construction is affecting their respective businesses and how they're preparing for the future that's offsite enabled. And if anyone has any questions or anything like that, please make sure to add them into the Q&A. So at the very end of this, we'll try to leave some time toward the end just to be able to take all the attendees' questions that they may have. Looking forward to the panel, and Brian, I will hand it off to you.
All right, thank you. And we have 1 hour scheduled for this total. Is that correct? Including
that is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm excited to be here with Michael and Laura. I will kind of caveat that we're having some audio issues. So Laura, she's having an echo on her end, so she's gonna kind of work through that and gut it out. But so just in the audience, just let us know if you're unable to hear us. I'm going to jump into screen share one more time. Okay. Oops. So I guess I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. Laura, if you want to go first and kind of share a little bit about what you do and your background.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Laura Dwyer. I'm the business development leader for Dupont Performance Building Solutions. We have a portfolio of products that manage water, air, and thermal for building envelopes. And my role is to better understand the needs of our customers and create solutions for our customers using our existing portfolio and creating new products and solutions to meet the needs, the future needs of our customers.
Thanks, Laura. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, I'm Michael Kinner. I am the principal and founder of Miken Development. We are the 4th largest infill development company in Nashville, Tennessee. We do everything from single family to industrial adaptive reuse to historic preservation. We've kind of run the gamut of development in the last 8 years since its inception. Miken's done about 50 million to date in development. We've got another pipeline of about 50 million left that we own and control, and we're constantly adding new projects to the pipeline. And we're kind of a for-profit, mission-oriented development company. One of our missions is that we develop at least 10% of every project as affordable, and we like to think outside the box. So that's kind of interesting that we're talking about boxes today.
So I just placed, if anyone wants to learn more about DuPont's work in performance building solutions or Miken, I threw those links in the chat, so feel free to kind of look through those. So my name's Brian. I'm the CEO at Module. We're a Shadow Ventures incubator company. And our goal is to enable housing providers like Miken, so developers and builders, to leverage the benefits of prefab to deliver great projects in their neighborhoods. So you can think of Module as almost like a design build firm for modular. We have a standard product that's tailored for infill sites, so kind of vacant land in cities. That product is can be townhome product, detached single family, or small multifamily. And then we work with a network of factories who can basically deliver that product. So our goal ultimately is to provide attainable housing, workforce housing, attainable housing at scale. And so we're really excited to have Dupont and Miken here today for this panel discussion. We're actually working with both Dupont and with Miken in kind of pushing the industry forward. So before we jump into the kind of the official panel discussion, I know some folks may know a lot about offsite construction. Some folks may know a little bit, but I have a couple of slides to just set the scene for our panel today that I'm going to click through. So, you know, we like to say that prefab comes in all shapes and sizes and quality. So there are, I think of, so obviously prefab or offsite construction is a method of construction, and there's a couple of different SKUs or varieties. We have what we call 2D offsite construction, which are wall panels and roof trusses and floor trusses. Those are sort of 2D components. And then we have 3D or volumetric modular and manufactured construction. That's when an actual component, kind of an entire floor of a project is built in a factory. So I'll go kind of from, first I'll start on the right, manufactured housing. So this is actually not the work that we at Module do, nor the work that we're doing with Miken, but manufactured housing is what people sometimes first think of when they hear of prefab. And that's actually just one piece of the entire industry. So manufactured housing is regulated by HUD. So HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, created a separate building code, separate from the International Building Code. And that allows for this type of housing to be built. It's typically the most affordable form of housing in the United States. And you'll see these oftentimes, you know, some people call them trailers or trailer parks, but oftentimes they're placed on land where the person who owns the actual structure is renting a piece of land on which they put that. So this is what's interesting about HUD is there's a chassis. You can kind of see in that photo, there's actually a metal chassis built into the product, and that's so that it can be shipped around. So that's HUD code. Module does not do HUD code, but that is one type of offsite construction. Then in the middle, this is kind of our specialty, modular construction. So this is the same building code as site-built construction, so IRC, same energy code as well. And effectively, what we're doing is we're completing about 60 to 80% of the building in the factory. So cabinets, flooring, drywall, electrical. You can see what's being lifted with the crane. That was built in a factory and then installed on site. And then the local contractor takes over, puts on the siding, puts in the appliances, and completes the site work. So what's interesting about modular is that you get 2 building permits. You get a state building permit because what's built in the factory is actually inspected in the factory. So the state regulates that. So you get a state level building permit from the factory will attain that. And then the state will send someone to the factory to inspect what's going on there. That gets shipped to the local project site and installed. And then the local building inspector doesn't look at anything that's done in the factory. They're just inspecting what's done on site. So with modular, you can do a basement or a crawl space, but you can't build modular on a slab. So that's one kind of, just a kind of a quick overview on modular. And then panelized construction. Again, same building code as site-built construction, but now you have, like you see here, 2D wall panels built in a factory and installed with a crane. You can do about 20 to 30% of the building. In some cases, you can put the windows, doors, and sheathing done in the factory. And that can be built on any type of foundation, and it's typically installed with a crane. Automation is starting to make its way into factories. So you'll see this is a wall panel factory. This image on the right is from a company called Benson Wood up in New Hampshire, and they do a passive house wall panel. But you can start to see that they have these Weinman framing stations, which automatically frame and nail. The machine on the left is actually doing insulation, so blow-in insulation automatically. So we're starting to see automation creep its way into offsite construction because it's an easier place to implement automation versus, you know, out in the field. And then there's a lot of new capital flowing into offsite, right? You've seen a lot of 3D printing happening. Company called Mighty Buildings out in the Bay Area. There's a concrete 3D printing company in Austin, Texas. And then you're starting to see some developers purchasing these bathroom pods for multifamily projects. So there are now factories that just build effectively the bathroom, and they're shipping those to multifamily projects in the US and abroad. So these are just some interesting trends that I think we should be aware of and kind of set the scene for today's conversation. And from where I sit as a company that runs, that runs in the offsite construction space, I think why I'm excited about it is that the U.S. housing market is super undersupplied right now. Right, this is from Freddie Mac. You'll see we were at about 2 million housing starts pre-crash, and it's taken a long time to ramp up, and that's partly because we don't have enough labor. So I think this trend sets up well for companies to start, companies like Miken to start adapting offsite in their strategy. And then we all know that the construction industry is unproductive. That's why Shadow Ventures exists. That's why we're all here today. But this is a challenging, this is a challenging statistic that construction really has not grown in productivity. But despite that, despite I think the trends being in favor of offsite, we see that adoption is still pretty low. If you look at the United States, this graph on the right, 2%, roughly 2 to 3% of residential construction is built modularly. And then if you look at the UK, Germany, and Japan, they are so much farther ahead. And this is related to single family homes. So this is just for single family homes. But Europe and Japan are much farther ahead of the US. And so in the United States, the work that Laura's doing and the work that Michael are doing, it's really important to start bringing offsite into the kind of mainstream. So I think some of the reasons why I believe its adoption is low, that it's stigmatized. People associate manufactured housing or trailers with offsite or prefab in general. The state-by-state regulation, and then the lending industry. And we'll talk more about Mike can talk more about the lending industry and how it's really not set up for modular. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of share a couple of slides here to set the scene for everyone, to bring everybody up to speed on what's happening in the modular world. And then lastly, the benefits of modular being that it's a more efficient way to build. There's fewer subcontractors to manage because the factory is effectively a super subcontractor. Climate controlled environment. So we're building indoors, so people can have 2 feet on the ground when they're building a roof, not up in the air. And then there's less waste. That's another huge benefit from our perspective as a company in the sustainability. So I just wanted to share a couple of slides to set the scene, and then now we're going to turn it over and do some Q&A with our panelists. And I see we have a question or a comment. Thanks, Jennifer. Great to see you here at Shadow Summit. Okay. All right, give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up some questions, and then we're going to start kicking things off. And then we'll try to wrap up around 9:45, 9:50 or so. That'll be my goal for today. All right. So let's start with you, Laura. What are at Dupont? What are the headways that you guys are making in building products for offsite construction? What are some of the progress that you guys have made in the last 5 years?
Yeah. So typically our portfolio products were designed to be installed on site. We have some name brands that people are probably familiar with, Tyvek, Styrofoam, but really designed and engineered to be installed by labor on site. And I think one of our key areas of initial focus was to determine how to make those or change those for a manufacturing opportunity. So what do we need to do from a configuration perspective and an installation perspective? What are the key considerations in application, because you have transportation and on-site installation? So that's one of the reasons we were working with Module, is to say, okay, here's our portfolio of products. They deliver a lot of value to the building envelope, but are we delivering that value in the best way in an offsite situation? And so we continually learn how to modify our solutions to be installed so that they are robust in factory through transportation and then of course installation. But in addition to that, what's important is what is it that we can bring to the table? So what is it that we need to do from a solution innovation perspective to make offsite easier to do, easier to install when it's on site? So we have a innovation pipeline really thinking around how we bring those envelope solutions to our customers in different ways using offsite with that delivery on site, that full consideration of the value chain.
So Laura, when your team came to the factory to visit, what were some of their takeaways from what they saw in the factory?
I think one of the key considerations was sequencing. Like, certainly in a factory situation, it happens faster than it would on an on-site situation. So our installation and application instructions appropriate for a factory situation versus what we do on site. So really thinking through how the windows are installed, how our flashings are installed, when to do the continuous installation, how to make sure that we have the right information for cladding integration, and then how to integrate those modules together were some of the key things that we wanted to make sure we had available to our customers to make that offsite installation easier, and again, that on-site installation easy as well.
Thanks, Laura. So Michael, as a developer who's delivered a lot of units in the Nashville area, why are you deciding to kind of dip your toe into the offsite industry?
We met you guys actually, I do believe, through this platform, and modular construction was something that was interesting to us already, because essentially we've had the same construction practices for over 100 years. Dupont built Dupont towns all over America. They were all the same kind of panelized construction system that they still use. It's the John Levitt model. It hasn't changed much. It's become more production. There were some bigger builders that shifted to steel during COVID when lumber prices went high, and you could see the adjustment happen. But one of the things that I realized is kind of twofold. A, if you're going to make offsite work, you got to be able to make it work, and you got to be able to make it work regionally, and kind of have localized approaches so that your pipeline is not a huge pipeline all the way across America, as we saw with that company that went bankrupt that was trying to do modular, and I forget the company's name. But I also think that just from a simple supply and demand perspective, I think that offsite will solve a lot of solutions that we saw and became very prevalent during COVID, when you could not get all the exact supplies and materials that you needed because of our shipping container supply issue that we had globally. A lot of the products that we could have had in a giant factory, essentially stockpiled so that we're not taking the Toyota model of running as lean and mean as possible, but you've got enough to build houses for 6 months, in case anything happens. There's no disruption of that supply. And there's big players like D.R. Horton and guys like that, and they're able to stockpile warehouses full of lumber. But smaller guys like me, we're totally open and exposed to the fluctuation in the market. So kind of lumping together an economy of scale of doing modular with other groups became a way to kind of look at how do we fix some of the supply and access problems that we're having currently.
Yeah, that's a great point about, the smaller builders may not get this. They don't have the same relationships that the huge D.R. Hortons of the world have. So I'm curious, Laura, with COVID, when COVID hit, and what did you see from a supply chain perspective? What were some of the challenges that hit Dupont during that time?
Well, I would even say that we're still facing challenges.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's probably unprecedented from a supply perspective, from even us getting our raw materials that we need to make our products. And then freight is, getting freight is insane, both to incoming raw materials to make our products and then outgoing. So I think it's just been a really interesting time to really evaluate what your value chains look like, you know, and how we make our product, so that we can maybe weather this type of storm better in the future. But I don't know of a manufacturer that hasn't experienced some type of disruption, even from a labor perspective, like just getting people to work in our plants. So we face the same situation that, you know, you go to a restaurant and you're told it's an hour wait, but you see 8 tables empty. It's because labor, we're facing the same thing from a manufacturing perspective. So, you know, it certainly has impacted us, but I think we're also learning more about our supply chain. But that's why offsite's an interesting option for us, because you can ship directly to offsite. The labor pools in offsite could be different than the labor pools we see on site. So I think it really has given us a lot to think about throughout our value chain.
So as you talk about shipping direct to the factory, which has, you know, they are able to buy in bulk compared to, you know, the kind of the average regional developer or builder. A question that came in from Jennifer, which is actually one of my next questions, was, you know, is Dupont creating a new product line specific to offsite, or are there any products that you guys have developed that you're able to share that are going to be installed in the factory? And are there any case studies or examples of that, Laura, that you're able to share?
So we have an innovation pipeline that I can't share because it's proprietary. But what I will say is we do have a boatload of products already in our portfolio that are applicable for offsite. And we're looking at, again, as I mentioned earlier, different configurations to make them easier. Do we need to have longer rolls of Tyvek, bigger sheets of CI? How do we apply those in a factory? Can we use adhesives instead of fasteners? So it's really looking at a broad, from an application perspective, and then how do we create products that are innovative that you could do in a factory and then install on site. So yeah, we have some things. I just can't, unfortunately, I can't share them all.
So Michael, you know, Laura's talking about creating new products and kind of changing maybe the dimension of Tyvek or the size of installation. What do you see is the biggest challenge to incorporating modular construction into your business? What is that as a developer?
I see it as a disruption of the entire system, because you have to get your bankers to rethink how they finance the entire deal. You then have to also get your site guys to rethink how they're going to prep the entire site. And then, you know, your sales team is about to just have an entire project in the lab, as opposed to doing a 100-unit project, 20 units at a time, which is how you normally would do it. And so I think that the whole system essentially will need to be rethought out for module, from the financing perspective to the construction perspective to timelines. I think that it should shorten timelines. I think that it's going to cause you to heavily front end load your financing in order to get the boxes ready in the shops. And I think that from GC perspective, most GCs work on a cost plus basis, so they're going to bucket and hate it and find anything they can do to talk trash about modular first, because that's the nature of their beast. Because if everything's done in shop, they're not going to be able to charge a huge cost plus. So they're going to take any chance they can to take a shot at why this is not the best process you should build at as a developer. And that's when challenge comes in, is to say, okay, you know, really look at this with an open mind. And you know, if module can hit the goals that they say they can hit, and our contractor says that they can't, you know, what are we going to go with? And so that's kind of the thing I think that people are going to run into in the field. Those are the challenges. I think from a supply chain, once you have the relationships built for the offsite, once you've got the facilities geared up to be able to handle a stackable product that's a townhouse model, and once you can show the economy of scale and the deliverability, I think at that point, that's when you're really going to have developers latch on to the idea, because nobody's going to do it if it's a net negative or net neutral. But if you can show developers where it's a net positive construction cost, but you're shaving your timeline and more than half, then that's when people's ears perk up and everyone goes, wow, we should really look at module. And nobody's done that to date with modular construction. And I think that's where you guys come in.
So to your point, Michael, about financing a project, you know, we talk to lenders quite a bit, and the idea, lenders are set up that once things are installed on site and they can send that third-party person to go look at it, that's when they're ready to give you the construction draw. But in a modular case, the factory is building a lot of the project not on the location of the land. So the factory sometimes wants paid either upon delivery, so not upon installation, but upon delivery on the road. So when it's sitting on the road, right, like right next to the project site. And then in other cases, the factory actually wants paid before it leaves their facility. Because from their perspective, they can't just back the truck, you know, they can't just take it off the foundation and take it back. So that is a pain point I've seen for adoption and offsite, is solving the gap between when the lender is comfortable paying for something versus when the factory needs paid.
And Brian, just a live stream brainstorm for you real quickly. I just connected two dots. I have a friend who is on the board of Built, which is the largest construction draw company in the US. And I think if you could get Built, which is a platform that most banks use, to create a platform for module, that could be a way to create a system that you can say, here, guys, here's what you're already using. Here's software. All you gotta do is plug and chug this in the reverse way. And I think getting innovative like that with these guys that are creating systems for banking, for us, you know, everything that we do is on the automated draw now, and they send their inspectors out. Well, you could probably get Built to do the same thing, just using the site inspectors at the facilities, things like that. Like that's where we have to get creative in adapting the banks, because banks are giant dinosaurs. You know, the fact that they're not extinct already is beyond me. But you know, they move slow, they don't make decisions quickly, and you know, they don't adjust well. And so you have to literally change them at a cellular level from the ground up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I'll look them up, Built. But that is one of the pain points. If I'm a developer and I want to, okay, I'm ready to do offsite, but then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I have to come out with cash earlier than my bank's ready to do that. That's another hurdle, and that's risk.
Well, I think it comes down to your banking relationship too. If you can explain it to your banker at the front of the project and set it up going in with that mentality, and you have the right banker that will work with you, then that's great. What you're going to find is that Bank of America and, you know, Citibank and these big giant guys that all their job is to place capital, they're not going to take time to want to learn and adjust to your model. So smaller banks will be the bread and butter for these first modular things until they get adopted as, you know, regular practice.
So it's interesting to talk about that. I'm putting in an article in the chat here for folks. So JP Morgan just announced that they are investing into they've invested into a modular company in the Bay Area, and they're now looking into creating construction draws specific for the modular industry. So like finally we have a big player moving. But on the other side of the equation, we have these GCs, right? And the people that are in the field typically building. So Laura, I'm curious, when your team talks to site builders and site contractors, what are you hearing from them about offsite and about, you know, are they hesitant to do it? Are they interested in doing it? What are you hearing from the GC side?
Yeah, I think from the GC and builder side, it's sort of a mixed bag. It's prove it to me. Like I want someone to prove it to me. I'm not sure I'm going to be the experimenter or the first mover on this. And I think that there are areas where I'll use panelized as an option. There's areas where we've been using panelized walls with integrated functionality delivered to the job site for 20 years, you know, and specifically in the upper Midwest where it's cold. They use offsite because it's a way they can continue to build. But, you know, I think a lot of it's around education, helping our customers understand that if they have a source for offsite, it's great. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is what we're seeing primarily for offsite is people are just building what they've always built on site. They're just moving it under roof. So we think about solutions and helping our customers understand value. It's a range of, yes, you get value if you just want to do that build under roof like you do today, but there's also great opportunity to innovate. I think, Brian, you showed different materials, different processes, using automation, using technology to help the process of building homes be easier and even more durable, more robust, and more sustainable.
So, and it looks like Michael had a connection issue. Looks like he's going to jump back on in a minute here. So, with your work, Laura, with the Housing Innovation Alliance and some of the other programs that you're part of, I think with NREL, what do you see the trends right now? What is top of mind for you as you're thinking about the offsite strategy that DuPont's working on?
I think one of our key drivers is how does this become a bigger market than it is today? And I think in the conversation we've been having, there's a lot of stakeholders. So one of the things I like about the Housing Innovation Alliance, there's also the ABC Collaborative sponsored by the Department of Energy. It's NREL has a program that was really looking at making sure that when we build offsite, we're doing it sustainably. It's going to take collaboration and emphasis from organizations like the Housing Innovation Alliance, like the ABC Collaborative, to bring all those stakeholders together to truly identify what some of the challenges are and then come up with solutions to address those challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, in our experience working with DuPont, it was collaboration. And so on the project we built a mixed income housing project here in Pittsburgh. And we relied on DuPont to help us. We were going to get the project Zero Energy Ready certified by the Department of Energy. And so part of that is how do you create a good building envelope that can stand the test of weather and extreme weather, but also reduce our operating costs. So we worked, I remember we set up a meeting with the DuPont team and the factory, and we sat down and we basically walked through the drawings, the drawing set that we had created for the project. And this was in the factory. And then to look through the factory. And we came up with a building envelope, nothing from scratch, but just with the existing components, the way the factory builds, what DuPont's knowledge of performance building. And we created an envelope that we could build in the factory so we were completely weather tight. And that was a really interesting experience for us because in modular, the widest you can ship on this in PA is really 15 feet 9 inches. So that's like the dimension that we were building, the module that we were designing to. So we wanted to maximize the interior space of that. But then when we sat down with the DuPont Performance Building team, we realized that if we wanted to get the full building envelope done in the factory, then we had to add exterior insulation to the outside, right? So we had thought that from sheathing to sheathing we were dealing with 15.9, but really it was 15.7 because we had 1 inch of exterior on either side. So I think conversations like that, where we're learning the dimensions, what is the limits of the modular industry, and we're also kind of looping in good building performance techniques from DuPont. Those are really valuable conversations for us because then we can tune our product. Like in the future, okay, maybe we'll make our homes 1 inch shorter so we can add maybe 2 inches, of exterior insulation or something like that. So, but those conversations only happen when you get those same people in the room, and it's great to work on a real project like that because then it's tangible, right? So that's really nice.
Agree.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, sorry about that.
That's all right. We were talking about kind of where the trends are happening or what the future of offsite looks like. And so I'm curious, where you sit in Nashville, Tennessee, what has to change for offsite to really take off in your mind? I'm going to pause my camera here for a second.
I think that Nashville's ready for it. I think that we've already done some modular construction projects here. There's a condo building. There was about 60 units that was done by another group. We've got a 200-unit shipping container building. It's a shipping container complex that's getting built right now. It's all modular technically. So Nashville is pretty progressive when it comes to building codes. They've thought ahead a lot of this. So I think that Nashville is ready for this kind of product. It all comes down to just going and having your pre-con and having your conversation with the head of codes and with the guys down at codes administration and the guys that are doing the sign-offs on them, and just kind of talking through what the process is. Because if you just throw anything at any codes or planning department in any city in the U.S. and say, here's this, figure it out, they're gonna laugh, because they don't want to have to spend any extra brain power doing anything beyond what their job already is, and most of them are already way too overworked and underpaid. So you have to literally get wrapped it and hand it to them and walk them through the entire process, and you'll still have to handhold even after that. So basically just familiarizing your local municipality with what it is you're doing from the front end, from the inception, making sure they're cool with it, and then talking them through the process as you're going, and just basically babysitting them is what I found would be the best way to have this happen seamlessly.
Yeah, babysitting. We use that term a lot, because I agree. And especially with COVID, municipalities aren't in the office, so the plan reviewers are sitting at home, and that's really difficult. And then you throw on top of that, oh, by the way, this drawing set is stamped by this third-party group, and the state has already inspected this. You'll get a blank stare from some people. So I think education is really critical.
I think going to the heads of those departments as opposed to going to the first person you get at the first desk. Because if you go to that first person that's at the front desk of that department, they're automatically just going to say no anyways, because that's what they do. It's called CYA. And then they send it up the ladder to the person that can give you a yes without worrying about losing a job. And so if you kind of start with, hey, I need to talk to the head of building codes, I need to talk to the head of this group, and really just start there, and then work your way down to the field inspector. Once you've got the people at the top grasping it, it's going to be the best way to work that process. I fully believe in approaches to almost everything in life, but I think this is one you would do differently.
I think the familiarizing yourself, and when you go into a new market, it can be difficult. We're building a project in Seattle, Washington right now, and we've never, we're not based there, so we face that challenge of educating those local plan inspectors about that. As far as education goes, I feel like these case studies, we've produced a case study now on one of our projects, but getting out there in front of the stigma, Gregory has a question here. How do you overcome the challenges and perception of lower quality? And that's really through, I think it's a couple things. One, it's getting product out there and getting great, great testimonials from your projects. That's one way to do it. And we have a video actually about the Blackstreet project, some great testimonials. The second is getting those decision makers, those plan reviewers, and the folks at city government and lenders into your product. So we built on Blackstreet, we built 4 units, so 2 single family homes and a duplex. And part of that duplex is our show home space. And we built that specifically because we knew there was going to be this stigma about, it's a modular project, it must be lower quality. But we've toured a lot of people through that house now. from local government to developers from out of town to lenders. And what everybody says when they walk in, they're like, wow, this is really solid construction. I mean, they're really impressed with how quiet it is. Those are the two comments that we get, like, wow, this feels very solid. And my God, your house is quiet, because it's on a busy city street. So I think that's, and obviously you can't take everybody through your house, but I think to the extent you can, when you do build a project, get those local folks at economic development or city government and lenders, get them through there, because they can feel, they've walked through enough projects that they can tell what's good construction and what's not good construction. That's how we overcome challenges of quality.
I always say it comes in the pitch as well, because for me as a developer, looking at it from that standpoint, my materials are not very different at all.
That's right.
I get to control my entire environment, so that I make sure that everything is built indoors, and so that guys don't take rain days off. There's none of that. I'm not missing anything for incremental weather changes. I'm also not going to get any weather damages during the process. And then on top of that, you got to think you're getting a much better product built. It's all assembled and delivered and then snapped straight together. So nothing sits out, nothing weatherizes. There's not a point where you get the framing inspection and then you've got 30 to 45 days for an inspector to come out before you put your siding on, and your house wrap and everything else, where your OSB just sits there and gets rained on and warped. So like, if you really think about what's a better product, something that's built in a more sterilized environment. So would you rather have your medication made on the side of the street, or would you rather have your medication made in a laboratory where it's a clean, sterile environment that you can control? Personally, I can tell you I'd rather have my medication come from a laboratory, and I'd rather have the control of building a house in that same kind of environment.
I think that's a great lift, Michael, around we're not building these with inferior products. My portfolio that I deliver on site is the same portfolio we worked with Brian on to include in his project. The same high quality products and solutions, just installed in a controlled environment.
Well, the big difference is that these guys can guarantee that I can hit Energy Star, 45L, all these other things. And if you haven't looked at 45L and you're a home builder, that's a $2,000 tax credit for basically hitting Energy Star. And so they can certify that I can hit those in the factory. And then when it comes out, basically we blower door test and we're good to go, because we made all the qualifications already. And so that we're not having to go through plans to retrofit to make sure that 45L is going to work. It's all kind of pre-designed, pre-built that way. And so as far as hitting a quality efficiency, I think that if modular is done correctly, and if the factories, do it the way that they do currently do it, I mean, they build to a good standard as is, hitting all those designations in factory and having guaranteed delivered to hit is amazing to me, because those are all things that are a giant pain in my rear when I'm doing them in the field. And so, that would be the other plus side I can tell you from a developer perspective.
That's great. I like the, I definitely want my medicine from a lab. I don't want it on the tree either. I like that. So I guess, maybe before we kind of wrap up here, and folks who are in the audience, please do send your questions in through the chat. I guess any last, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, Ryan, I was going to say we did have a couple questions if you guys are ready for those, but.
Sure, let's take those. Why not?
So the first question that was in the Q&A, is there anything being done from like a high level, so like trade groups, industrial organizations, that impact regulation on local and zoning code? So my understanding is that's actually one of the largest impacts for modular building, is right, dealing with all of the local zoning requirements. And is there any, I think the question is there any organizational body that's trying to impact those changes?
Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, the International Code Council actually identified that doing integrating offsite into their code was critical. So they actually, in one of the fastest code development cycles I've ever seen, or development, they created an offsite code that's going to be proposed. So certainly the International Code Council is aware and wants to help support offsite and is trying to develop the codes that enable it.
Got it. Great. Okay. And the second question that was in the Q&A was, has COVID accelerated offsite construction? It's a multiple part question, it looks like. Has COVID accelerated offsite construction? And then the second part was, do factory workers need to be as skilled as tradespeople, or is it allowing new career access for people that were not originally in construction?
So I think from where I sit, I think more developers and builders are looking at offsite for some of the reasons that Michael shared. I will say that the modular industry is not immune to the supply chain challenges. So what I've seen from factories that we talk to, they are getting a ton more orders in. So a lot more people looks at using modular construction. And then on top of that, so their backlogs are starting to grow. And then they're also experiencing labor issues and labor challenges. So they're not immune to that. The factories that we work typically located in rural areas, and so the cost of labor is lower relative to someone who's building in a metropolitan area. It's not always the case, but I see oftentimes the factories are not union shops, so it's non-union labor that they are building with in the factories. I think what's interesting is at the factory, we were talking to one of the bigger factories in Pennsylvania called Ritz-Craft. They build probably 1,500 homes out of this plant, and they're trying to really help train up new labor because they know that the labor force is aging out. So they created a training facility at the factory where they can onboard and bring in young people and educate them about, working at the factory. And a lot of the requests that the younger generation is looking for is they want to actually be able to learn different trades. So rather than just be a drywaller, they say, hey, I want to spend a few months learning how to drywall, and then they'll do that. And then I want to start learning framing. So that's one of and they said they're welcoming that. This was one of the kind of people in the ownership suite. They said, we welcome that because if that helps retain our labor force is to train them up on different jobs, and it's not as challenging because they can come to the same location every day and they can jump to another part of the line. That's some of the work they're trying to do to, enhance the environment for their labor force, but they are still struggling with labor.
I also think as we add more technology, use technology to enable offsite construction, you're bringing in a different type of employee, someone with more technical background to manage processes. I love the robotics. That's a completely different demographic than currently we use as, when we're building under a roof as we do on site. So I think it's opening opportunity for more technical types of careers, but also a more diverse workforce. I think a factory setting is more attractive to a broader audience. Brian mentioned younger people, but women. It just gives a better working environment, I think, for a broader part of our population.
And I would say to answer that question as well. Think about if you lived in Tennessee and you had to frame a house in the summer when it was 100 degrees plus humidity. And then you had to also frame a house in the winter when it's 30 degrees and raining. If you were thinking about going to be a tradesperson, would you want to endure all that? Or would you rather be in a climate controlled area? So if you're thinking about how could module attract trades to the construction industry, it can make life a lot more livable while you're doing construction is what I would say. And so I think that, that nationally we have labor shortages in almost every industry. We also have a huge shortage in just a bottom up approach to it. We got rid of most of the vocational training in most of our high schools throughout America. We're just now starting to put back in makers training, which is vocational training, but also artisan training and all kinds of other things. So I think that once we get a good feeder program from the bottom up, we will fix some of our trade issues. But as far as getting people into construction and how to do it. I think module becomes much sexier when you realize that you're not sweating and freezing all
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. That was the two questions in the Q&A. Obviously, if anyone has more questions, please add them into the chat.
All right. Laura or Michael, do you guys want to share anything else? Those are all the questions I had, but if you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share, feel free to do that.
I think I just want to reemphasize that there's a lot of stakeholders that impact this. It's conversations like this that lift up challenges and, you know, continue to support and look for opportunities to work together to overcome some of the objections. I think Michael said a trade. I'll think of anything I can think of to maybe not have to do this, but continue to build case studies, case histories, reinforce the fact that offsite, it uses some of the same materials or even improved materials versus what we see on site, and then the consistency and quality, because you're able to do this in a factory and it's repeatable. I think are key messages that we want to make sure that the industry holistically is hearing.
Great. Michael, anything to add?
No, I think we covered everything.
Great. Well, I just want to say thank you, Brian, thank you, Laura, thank you, Michael, for this discussion. It was really valuable. Hopefully, all the attendees got value out of it as well. And then next up, we do have a keynote. So there's a little bit of a session break for everyone, but there's a keynote with Mark Teixeira. You guys may know Mark Teixeira. Played 14 seasons in MLB for the Yankees. Large real estate investor and developer now in the Atlanta market. So I'm looking forward to that keynote as well. But thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Laura. Appreciate your time today. This was really great.
Appreciate
All right.
you guys.
Thanks, everybody.